Good evening. We'll call the January 7th, 2015 meeting of the Community Preservation Committee to order. We're pleased tonight to have HCAM televising these proceedings, so I would ask anybody that is speaking tonight to identify themselves for our viewing audience at home. As always, I thank for all the members of the CPC for being here, members of advisory, our wonderful administrative assistant, Carol Costello, and Roger Fernandez, the town engineer, who provides invaluable advice and confirmation of values to us. Our first order of business tonight is the Tree and Park Barn renovations project. A fittingly cold night for to discuss improving the efficiency of the windows.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I'm Betty Foley, Assistant Town Administrator.
And I am Dick Orr. I'm the tenant in the building.
Nice and warm today?
Yes. I kept active today for sure.
One of those days where it would have been helpful to have new windows, huh?
And as you know, I think most of us on the committee have a good familiarity of what this project and other projects involve from prior presentations. It would probably be useful for each proponent to give a quick executive summary for our viewing audience at home, and then bring us up to date on where things are so that we can most efficiently use our small amounts of time allocated to 9 different projects tonight.
What we're proposing is replacement of 20 windows, not replacement, but removal and restoration of the existing windows. They're historically accurate windows, and in some cases the glass has been replaced over the years, and one of the possible people we spoke to said that they would replace the glass with old glass so that they would truly be the historic windows with the old glass, which is really very nice. In order to, the cost of that part of it is about $24,900. Mr. Orr, who is the tenant in the building, has offered to put in work in the amount of approximately $15,000.
Yes.
To leverage this and help us with the project. This is a town-owned building, and Dick has about a year and a half left, year and 3/4 left on his lease.
My motivations are not all altruistic, however. I feel that if I were to make this effort on the restoration of the Tree and Park Barn windows, that my hope is I will release the structure going in the future. So I thought that would certainly be in my favor if I were to do this work. So, but in the meantime, I'm anxious to secure the windows. They are extremely drafty. The snow comes in the upstairs windows at this point. So, and the work that would be done is this individual who gave us the quote for the restoration of the windows. She does the sash. According to historic regulations, she replaces glass with historic glass and the muntins and mullions, but much of the framework needs work. That is the parting beads and some sills and so forth. Not every window needs the same thing. Some are complete, some are completely missing. So Linda and I worked it out as the sash that she has restored is replaced to the various windows. Ahead of time, I will fabricate in my shop all the matching parting beads and so forth, those components. And as the sash goes back in, we would rebuild every window frame as we go along. And I had estimated that to be in the vicinity of $10,000 to $15,000, my efforts.
I would note that previously Mr. Orr has fabricated storm windows for the downstairs that are interior storms that are helping out downstairs.
Oh, yes, and I would do the same upstairs in the event that the...
And we've seen the talented work that Mr. Orr has done with some very significant historic pieces, and he is absolutely the appropriate person to do this historic renovation.
Thank you.
Bob, as the project manager, I do want to just ask Betty, I know that we had asked if it was possible to sort of give an idea of some of the expenses that the town has paid for over the time Mr. Orr has been paying rent. And I know it's Ironically, when I talked to Dick the other day, the toilet was broken, so obviously we had some expenses, and I know that the rent goes into the general fund, but were you able to kind of get an idea, some guesstimates as to
Well,
kind
the
of
plumbing repairs
expenses?
that happened just recently were approximately $1,000. Prior to that, we spent, about $1,800 on various other oil burner and water heater issues.
And that's over the past year or the past?
That's past couple of years.
Past couple of years, okay.
I would point out that there's no budget for the Tran Park building, so anything like that comes out of the town hall budget.
Understood, and I understand that, and just so that others know, that generally the rent goes right into the general fund.
That's true.
And so that expenses are coming out to pay those expenses exactly the same way. It's not as if a separate account is being set up so that the rent would be paying for that.
There's no appropriation so that we can charge anything to that building.
Understood.
So we can understand over the years, CPC will now be maintaining this building? Like when you need a new roof or anything, that we'll have to pay for that as well?
But we don't have to.
We-
It's,
Well, I mean, is that going to be sort of the understanding, because there is no budget for the building?
Well, maybe there will be, maybe a facility study might lay out something. Whether the town has the money or not is a different question.
and probably the lease situation is also going to figure into that.
It's just a concern.
I mean,
There's no budget to maintain a building that is owned by the town.
There is not any budget for this building. 5 years ago, 6 years ago, town meeting authorized the lease of the building, but it was a short-term lease. That's why I mentioned that there's a year and a half to run on the existing lease, and then it will have to go back to town meeting to see if the town wants to authorize another lease, or where we stand.
Any other questions or comments from members of the committee? Questions or comments from advisory or members of the public? Anything further you'd like to bring to our attention?
I can't think of anything, Dick.
I think
I guess question from Kathleen is, do you know when the roof was last replaced on that building? Or
I honestly don't. I'd have to go look it up. I really don't know.
it's not leaking at this point?
It's not leaking.
I believe it was within the last 20 years. There's some holes poked in the ceiling upstairs, and I'd asked John Bibby, when he was still in there, why the holes in the ceiling, and he had said that a couple of years prior to that, the roof was leaking, and in their efforts to find out quickly what the problem was, they just knocked some holes in the ceiling to get up there, and the roof was redone at that point. It seems to me it was like 12 years ago or something like that.
The building was used every day by the Department of Public Works Train Park Division until such time as the new Public Works building was put into use, so.
I'm wondering, just a comment, when you're doing this work, would it be a good idea to document it photographically on the restoration of some of the sash and casings? And maybe we could use those photos to augment the handbook that the Historic Commission typically passes or gives to homeowners who are on the inventory or in a historic district. Might be really helpful for people to learn about the process of restoring these windows, which are probably the same era or period as in a lot of these, a lot of the antique period houses.
I have to make sure I trim my fingernails.
Absolutely model those hands, but
I do want to comment because that does bring up the fact that the Tree and Park Barn is on next year's Hingham Historical Tour. So, it is a historic building that people in town take great pride in, and in my mind, we're very lucky that Mr. Orr right now is a tenant who is willing to do this work, so actually we're getting off quite nicely if we decide to go forward with this. But it is on the Historic House Tour next year, and so this work will be able to be done in time and show well for all of us.
I'm also trying to make arrangements with the senior center to offer woodworking classes in conjunction with the senior center. I thought that'd be kind of fun, a Wednesday morning or something.
Does it have a fire pole left over?
No,
No.
no one
Can
does
we
it.
restore the fire pole?
I'm afraid it's not my expertise, so.
the Historic Commission from time to time has sponsored presentations on window preservation. And this actually, following up with Gary's thought, this would be a wonderful thing to document before and after, and perhaps you'd be willing to talk about the process at
I'd
some
be
time in the
delighted,
future.
absolutely delighted. Sure.
I see an opportunity for HCAM,
Yeah.
seriously.
Yeah, it might be a great
Yeah.
project for HCAM to do some of the video documentation.
Wonderful.
Great. Is it only for seniors that you're offering? I'm not quite at that point, Mel.
Well,
Getting there.
I'm very flexible, but whatever sure. Whoever's interested, I'm sure.
Okay, any further comments or suggestions? Anything from the public? Thank you very much. We're off to an early
Yes,
schedule.
we're on a roll.
We have
It'll make up for the breath.
the Conservation Fund next, Abby Pearsall. And Scott, you're the,
This is, yeah, I
All right.
you can filibuster because you've got extra time.
Do I have extra time?
And the next proponent isn't here yet, so.
Any other questions or other projects? All right. Do you want me to wait, or do you want me to get started?
No, it's
If you wanted to stick to your...
fine with us if you want to jump right into it.
All right. So as we've been through before, the Conservation Fund, for folks at home who might not be familiar with it, is the funding mechanism that the Conservation Commission has to spend toward things like land acquisition, property management, appraisals for properties that the town might consider acquiring, that type of thing. The current request before the CPC is for a $50,000 addition to that fund. I did talk to the Conservation Commission on Monday night, as I understood there to be a request from CPC to consider modifying that number, and the Conservation Commission asked that we stick with that $50,000. So that would bring, if it were awarded, the total balance of the Conservation Fund to $100,529.18. So the current balance right now, the available balance, is $59,529.18. As part of the application materials, we've outlined about $50,000 worth of projects that could be undertaken over the next year. There are certainly other projects beyond that amount that could be undertaken as well. Some of those projects include things like the update to the open space and recreation plan, which carried us from 2009 to 2016. We're coming up to a need to update that plan in order to keep the town eligible for state funding, for grant cycles and that kind of thing. So there's additional things that we could spend money on beyond just this $50,000. I think the commission thought that was a prudent amount to ask for and asked me to hold to it. So.
What's the target date for the plan?
I'm sorry, what was that?
You said the plan update, target date for that?
So the plan update, the current plan is valid through June of 2016, and so before that time, we want to make sure that we're moving toward an update to that plan. Now, we have a good base in the existing plan. The Trails plan that we're currently working on that was funded through last year's funding cycle is also giving us a very, very good head start on that. So it'll be a matter of sort of filling things in, coordinating with the planning board's master planning efforts, and making sure everything ties together. So we're well on our way, but there's still money we could spend toward it to make sure that we're ready to go before June of 2016.
Do you see using any of the money for the FEMA upgrades and our continuing battle with FEMA?
The commission hasn't discussed that yet. I don't know that it necessarily meets the sort of nature of the Conservation Fund and the mission of the Conservation Fund. If it were to acquire land for flood protection and water resource protection, then that's something that I think the fund could be used toward. If that were to sort of offset or to acquire lands, or if there were property buyout kind of opportunities for recreational purposes, that might be one use. But when it comes to things like the physical map revision that will be required from FEMA, that's not something that I would think we would be able to spend on.
I guess my concern, Abby, is that, in fact, I mean, I was the one that requested that the amount get lowered. We have more requests than we have money. So I guess I'm just questioning why the Conservation Fund should sit on $60,000 without having planned for it. I know there's a plan for the $50,000, but there's $60,000 sitting there. We'd all like to have extra money, but I'm just wondering it doesn't seem very compelling to say they just want to hang on to the money because there's things you could do, like, well, what are you going to do?
Right, and I completely understand that. I think the philosophical question here is the opportunity the opportunities that having that money affords, so that if a larger piece of land came available, if there were, properties for which there wasn't immediate funding, but if the town had X amount of dollars to spend toward, a property appraisal or working with other partners for larger acquisitions, or even smaller acquisitions, but it gives the commission the flexibility to go after properties that we may not be able to anticipate. I mean, part of the purpose of the fund is to provide that flexibility so that when opportunities do come up, the commission has money to work with that is substantial enough to make a difference toward starting these projects. Things like, phase one site evaluations, but a lot of it is that sort of property appraisal and partnering with other folks. So the commission is looking for that opportunity.
I would just add, since I work for a land conservation group, you don't know in the middle of the year if an opportunity arises and somebody needs to, there's a decision that an option payment to have an exclusive on that property comes aboard, and maybe you need $15,000 that you can't anticipate. So there's a delineation of these specific things, but let's say again, there's probably some flexibility in using this money, but if you didn't have those available funds, you would have to pass on an opportunity or call a special town meeting to have an appropriation for an option on a land conservation project, which isn't going to happen.
I just think we've seen another situation where people were giving a pot of money that was not without any specific purpose, and then they've kind of, and not to say this would happen here, started to run afoul of CPC rules because they went off in their own direction and made their own decisions on how the money should be spent, even though it was an appropriate use of CPC funds. So, it's just, to me, basically, then it just becomes an open checkbook. And this is money that's, in other words, if there's a plan, it seems good to me, but just to say, well, let's just have some money for something, I don't know. And again, cut money from somebody else's project in order to allow just a budget to be there, to me, doesn't seem prudent, but that's...
the nature of, there's a dynamic nature of conserving open space where the window may not conform with our window. And that's the whole point of having flexible funding.
But none of this money would be enough to buy a piece of property.
No. But I just said, if you need an option on a property and it's in the middle of the year, and what do you do? And there isn't a third-party partner who can front that money.
Does that come up yet?
It happens all the time in the world of land conservation. It may or may not have happened in this town. I don't know, going back to other acquisitions.
One example would be Mr. Sherman. Something like his land came up after our cycle entirely, and he was under pressure, as he was talking about, to make his house lot sellable. It might be a matter of a couple of months whether we could respond or not, and I think Abby's group would use it well. And if it doesn't spend, it's available for the future. You're not compelled to go to the candy store and spend it.
Right.
But it gives you a chance to buy aspirin when you need it.
Mm-hmm. I can give
just to review what the funds can be used for, since that issue has come up. With respect to open space, and I know you're familiar with this, the funds can be used for something related to acquisition, creation, preservation, not to support open space, and it can be used to rehabilitate or restore if the land was acquired with CPA funds. So a FEMA mapping project probably is not something that is eligible. And I think if there is anything that comes up with respect to the Conservation Fund where there's a question about whether it meets CPA requirements, we'd be happy to address it with you formally or informally. And I hear what Kathleen is saying, I hear what Matt is saying. I think traditionally this fund has been used to provide flexibility to the Conservation Commission. It has existed a lot of years, though, I think at lower levels. And I would sense that in the pressures that exist with competing projects, once we come to make voting recommendations, that there probably is some flexibility from the point of view of the Conservation Commission with respect to this request. Is that, if I could just get an answer to that?
I think the commission certainly understands that there's many competing interests for this money. And, again, the push for me was to sort of stay high and stay, sort of at the higher level so that we have that level of flexibility. But again, we understand certainly that there's many competing interests.
At one point, a long time ago, when I was on the commission, we had a $20,000 a year automatic appropriation from town meeting to use according to our best judgment. I mean, it didn't have the constraints of the CPC rules. It only lasted a few years, and it wasn't an awful lot. But it was helpful, and it made a difference. It was in the late 70s, but back in history. But it was very useful to have even some discretionary money.
And Abby, is there any other source of funds that feeds the conservation fund?
Not today. That's not to say that we couldn't pursue something like a separate warrant article at town meeting specifically for that purpose. So that's certainly something.
Fees, or there's no anything else that feeds it?
Nope.
It's strictly CPC? Okay.
Currently.
And not to labor the point, we do obviously have a little time, so we'll fill it in. But as a member of the Conservation Commission, I could speak very highly of Abby's approach to this. One thing I've certainly noticed, and since she's been the officer in town, is that a lot of new projects have been initiated. The Trails Project, the climate change, these have been funded through CPC as well as some grants, which Abby's been very diligent in seeking other sources of revenue for funding that type of study. And there really is a list. She's created quite a list of things that could be done. And we did discuss your point, Kathleen, and it's been said that we understand that having a big checkbook, if you will, may not be in the best light of all the other projects in town being considered as well as future. And it does get to be a philosophical question of if we need reserve funds, should it stay in the CPC account, which I know we do have funds held in CPC funds, or have it in the conservation fund. So it is a philosophical, it's not like one earns better interest or is able to do things differently. I think, as Bob pointed out, we would have to, before any monies were spent through conservation, to come and do a check, which is great that the CPC fund really works all year round. It's not like Bob can't be contacted or any future about how the money would be spent. So having it in the conservation fund would at least better streamline the ability to initiate a study, like any type of land acquisition. It would just kind of make things a little easier to come out of that fund. But I don't think Abby or anyone in the commission would simply say, "Hey, we've got this money. Let's just spend it on, a party or something." It would clearly be kind of restricted in use based on conversations between the Conservation Commission and CPC. And well, the plans, there is a plan. I guess it's just more. It's not specific in the sense of. We've really developed an actual program, but clearly, Abby has made quite a bit of efforts in thinking of ways that the Conservation Commission can better improve the lands we currently manage, and also integrating things like the Trails Plan and possibilities with the climate change studies, which may or may not be CPC permissible, but having the funds.
If there's $50,000 worth of work and it's a very small group of people, this is an ambitious plan already. Only $10,000 of the money we allocated this year has been spent. So we hardly spent any of the money that was given last year. And if you can get this $50,000 worth of work done, that sounds great. So let's get that done before we start worrying about more things to do.
The fundamental, I think, philosophically, a primary focus of the CPC as it relates to open space is the acquisition of new open space. And that's a key component of it. Without a unstructured amount of money that you can't necessarily plan for, because you don't know that. If you don't have that, this is for a discrete set of projects. If you had no more money, then you would pass up on opportunities to conserve land that may arise next February or July or something that we didn't know in advance to vet and present to town meeting. That would be a huge mistake, to not have money to be flexible. Whether you did all these projects, these could wait, some could happen, some might not happen, but not having flexible money to seize opportunities to conserve land that you don't know exist, because the market doesn't work that way.
Just as a specific, when we finish the current plan, the back of it is 7 years' worth of specific actions, specific sites, block and everything else, and purpose and probable amount. So there's a shopping list way beyond anybody's imagination, not even surprise things like Mr. Sherman. And you really need that discretion.
I will note, too, that this really is an annual item for the CPC. And we annually get reports from the Conservation Commission as to how prior money has been spent. And I think we have annually determined for many years that the expenditures have been proper. And just one other statement, because just for the sake of clarity, I didn't remotely mean to suggest that you needed to come see us any time you were going to expend something from the Conservation Fund, because I think most of the time the expenditures are very clear. It's just when there may be a question. Any further comments or suggestions from the members or from the public?
I'll ask one more. Could some of this money be used for a forest management plan? Because that's a way to conserve open space, and God knows we need one.
I think, so for the forest management planning effort, I think there are probably two tracks. One would be, because I don't know that Town Forest was acquired with CPC money, I'd have to go research the acquisition piece. Yeah, so part of it would be if it were forest management planning for the lands that were acquired, and that type of piece, or a separate ask from CPC next year to say, this is what we think it's going to cost to develop that particular plan, or in combination with a CPC grant and some other grants that we can look for. That's one of the next pieces that I think is important to look for as a town, is some additional sources of funding to look at town forest management.
Two observations. My initial impression would be that CPC funds probably could not be used under the open space category for the town forest. But to the extent that there were recreational evaluations, hiking trails or recreation opportunities, it might be possible to use CPC funds under the recreation rubric for such pieces of land.
If you don't manage your forest and a tree falls in you while you're cross-country skiing, that'd be bad.
Especially if you were under it.
I think it's a matter of looking at what portions of a project could be funded and then looking for alternative sources for the other pieces.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything further? Yes, Mr. Bellier. Could you go to the microphone, please? So.
Tom Bellier, Advisory Committee. Just a thought. Could the CPC vote to set aside funds, keeping them in its rainy day fund for conservation things and contingent upon review of a request at a later point in time? I don't know any of the legal ramifications at all.
I think our rainy day fund is essentially unspent money, and
so is this.
No, but this has been recommended to town meeting,
yeah,
and would be voted upon by town meeting, at which point it could then be expended by the Conservation Commission. But we're not, it's not to say we couldn't think about doing such a thing, but we're not presently considering proposing to town meeting that the CPC be given some kind of opportunity to spend money out of the rainy day fund. And I don't know that we could do that, because it seems to me it would not be consistent with the rationale of the Community Preservation Act.
Okay. Thank you.
So I think the point of having this is that they have flexibility to spend it throughout the year. I mean, if we put stuff in the reserve for open space, it still has to come before us through the normal cycle of CPA recommendations to town meeting.
Right. Any other questions? Well, thank you, Abby. Thank you. Always a pleasure to see you. Thank you all for all your good work. And we'd love to see you get involved with community gardens. And our next agenda item is the Social Country Club tennis court renovation. We have-
Should I put them on this, or?
Sure, can HCAM pick them up on the? Whoops. Was that about trees falling?
I have questions about this list.
Could you introduce yourself for the home audience? And you're on TV tonight.
Sounds great. I'm James McGrail. I'm the Director of Operations at South Shore Country Club.
And I'm William Friend, Chairman of the committee.
We're here to advocate for the South Shore Country Club tennis courts. As I went through the last time we were here, we have 3 tennis courts at the country club that are, as you can see from the photos, in pretty poor shape, in pretty severe disrepair, to the point where it's unsafe to play on them moving forward. So what we're asking to do is to do a process to renovate the courts that would allow for the fixing of the cracks and then an overlay of the whole courts, repainting, new lines, new nets, new posts, and new fencing, and some landscaping around the tennis courts to improve the asset at the club. The tennis courts that we have are currently available to the public, to anyone in Hingham to use. They're not. You don't have to be a club member. You don't have to have any sort of permit or pay to use. They're free and open to the public. We do provide tennis lessons throughout the summer for mostly juniors. We also service the SNAP program for their summer camp, which we use the courts for the staging area at the beginning of the day and at the end of the day, along with tennis throughout the day for those children that participate in that program.
Could you explain that program a little bit more?
Yeah. So the SNAP program is the Special Needs Athletic Partnership here in Hingham. And what we do at the club as part of that program is we run a summer camp, we did last year was the first year we've done it, and I believe it's the only program of its kind around anywhere. We had about 30 something kids last year, and it was put together late in the year, so we're hoping to grow it this year considerably. But it's a 5-day-a-week program, Monday through Friday, and it starts at 1 o'clock and runs till 4. And we do 3 things. The kids, during the course of the day, play tennis on the tennis courts, bowl in our bowling alley, and then play golf on our indoor golf simulators. And they rotate on the hour through that. So it's a pretty unique opportunity that could only be done at South Shore, where you have the golf, the bowling, and the tennis. I guess the children that are in the program, they go to school 11 months a year. And in the summer months, maybe year-round, I'm not sure, but their schooling ends at noon. So the parents are left in a situation where they have to find, if they work, they have to find some sort of program for these kids to do for the remainder of the day. And this is an opportunity for them to get a summer camp feel, like all the other kids in Hingham are doing pretty much, going to this type of summer camp where you can play tennis, play golf, and bowl. So it's pretty unique. We had success in it the first year, and we're looking to grow on it. But as you can see from the photos, it's not a very safe situation over there. So we'd like to continue to do that this summer. That program will grow. I've also started working with the rec department. I've worked in the past few years, with different tennis operators, the South Shore YMCA, Commonwealth Tennis. I've worked with 3 different tennis operators and have had a hard time growing the program, the instructional program, through youth tennis and adult tennis, mainly because of the conditions of the tennis courts. So moving forward, we looked at having, instead of the program that we had in place with the South Shore Y, working with the Hingham Rec to utilize some of they have different ways to outreach to all the different families in Hingham that they already have in place through their summer camp programs, to use that outlet to try to generate as much revenue as we can through tennis. And so we started working with the rec. I've met with Mark already a number of times to talk about how we'd structure that this year, and moving forward, and how we can try to utilize the already in place summer camp program to start like golf and tennis lessons for the kids that are in summer camp currently, another offering. So one of the offerings this summer would be a tennis and golf camp, which has never been offered before through Hingham Rec for Hingham children. So that's something, just an example of how once we can get these courts up to par moving forward, I think I can try to think outside the box a little and work with other departments in town to try to generate more revenue and make this operation more sustainable.
For the town, revenue for the town.
Yeah, revenue for the town to make this operation more sustainable. Roger's done this process before at the tennis courts at the high school. He had success with it. We would be going out to an RFP, hopefully after town meeting, and the goal would be to get this work done before July 1st, so that we can have tennis this summer and not have any lapse whatsoever in the programming. Like I said, the process that we're going to do is something that Roger has a comfort level with, something he's done before, and has worked. It worked at the high school, so we're looking to do the exact same process here, along with some fence repairs, new netting, and some landscaping. So that's really the bulk of the project, and with that, I'd turn it over to you guys for questions.
Vicki, you're the project manager.
The one comment I want to make, so that particularly people at home understand how South Shore Country Club manages their expenses, is the fact that, as Jay has pointed out, the tennis courts really have never been managed to be profitable. There has been no great effort put into creating revenue out of them, and we believe that by working with the rec, that's what we do, and we do it quite nicely, and there's plenty of opportunities. I love that we're going to do golf and tennis together. The kids already swim over there. So I think working together, I won't even say I think, I know working together, we can start making some revenues that will go directly back into the tennis courts. And we're very lucky in this town to have South Shore Country Club, but how do you have a country club without a tennis court? So $55,000 is what I think a very good way to make sure that this club maintains those kinds of facilities, and then we grow the program going forward. So I feel very confident that this is the best way to go, and with that, keep raising revenues so that that money can go back into fulfilling some of the long-term needs.
Roger, you've looked at both the process and the cost, and you feel this is the way to go as well?
Certainly, yep. We had discussed, full depth reconstruction, and then, so that cost was, 5-6 times more expensive than this approach. And when you consider the cost benefit and weigh that in comparison to the life cycle of the pavement, of the tennis courts, it's certainly the way to go. And
how many years will this buy?
We talked about that. Anything as it relates to anything with respect to whether it's tennis courts or roads, they require some sort of maintenance at some point in the future. So at 30 years, it just doesn't go away. It deteriorates a little bit as you go along. So there'll be some maintenance, I would imagine, between now and the time that it has to be entirely redone. But I would submit that certainly, 5 to 10 years. And during that period, there might be a need to repaint the courts or crack seal a crack that might present itself. I know at the high school we did that. It's got to be 2 years ago now, and it still looks like a brand new tennis court. If you've had a chance to, if you use it, you'll see. And so it was the same approach. So it's certainly from a cost standpoint, it's the best way to go, I would say.
The one other comment I would make is only because we went through this at the Meadows where I live, where we have tennis courts, and the alternative is to tear up the tennis courts. And if you think it's expensive to overlay tennis courts and bring them back to use, demolishing them and getting rid of them and turning them into a parking lot would be a much more expensive undertaking. And I certainly won't speak for Roger, but I'm sure he could speak to that. Should that be it would be much more expensive, and we would lose the opportunity, the SNAP opportunities, and so many other opportunities to grow these programs.
I want to single out Jay and the Country Club Management Committee for making these last as long as they did, but also for Roger finding the new way to stretch money so that we don't have to spend the $200,000. But also for Jay and the Country Club Committee, that they reach out and look for partnerships, and I think this is going to be a very, very good one for the town between the Country Club and Rec. I think this is only the beginning, and of course, SNAP really, I think you're going to see that program grow.
Yeah, we didn't start advertising that until May.
And we had 30-some
Yeah,
kids.
so imagine when we start this year, and,
Yep.
now in January. So
Well, some of the comments were that this has been the best program that those families have been involved in anywhere. It's
Very underserved.
it's pretty unique. I can't say when it's 95 degrees, the tennis is their favorite part. And when there's air conditioning in the simulators in the bowling alley, but
And with the symbiotic relationship of recreation and the country club, you'll probably be just making so much money from the tennis courts that you'll never have to see the CPC again.
hopefully.
Well, no, never's a long time. We like seeing you all.
All right.
Any further comments from members of the committee or questions? Any questions or comments from public? Anything further you'd like to add?
No, thank you guys. I mean, I think without this help, we're not able to do this. So, the program ends. So
Thank you, Jay, and thank you, Bill.
Thank you.
Good night. Stay warm.
They wouldn't want to be playing tennis in 30 below either.
And
They're out there golfing. Yesterday, there was about 10 players out there.
This is the greatest day.
we played 3 rounds last week. The Hingham Historical Collections Master Plan is next. And you're both on Hingham Celebrity TV, and if you could introduce yourselves for the home viewing audience.
I'm Eileen McCracken. I'm the town clerk and also the chair of the Historical Task Force.
I'm Jennifer Williams. I'm the town archivist who's been working with the town for the past year and a half.
And what we're here tonight for is to ask for monies for our third and final time, hopefully. No, it should be our third and final time here to continue what we've been doing. We started off at the library, or Jen started off at the library, and we are continuing on to the town hall. She's been in my office for a few months now, and I have a lot of empty cabinets. She's put them in acid-free containers, and it's we're very pleased in my office to have this happening, and she's going to continue on to other departments in the town hall, the school department, and also go on next year to the Historical Society. I just want to say that knowing that when I leave my position as the town clerk, that all of this work has been done for someone else behind me, and I think it's a great thing. And Jen is going to continue and tell you all the things that she's been doing.
All right. Hello, everyone, again. As I said, my name is Jen Williams, and we have been doing quite a lot of work this year. I have been working with volunteers, interns, and an archives assistant, and I have to say, very happy with the progress. We have, I think, completed probably about 90% of the records in Eileen's office, and the things in there are just absolutely fascinating. From overseers of the poor to oversized maps to arguments between town officers from the 1700s. Absolutely fascinating. And things that I look at and I think, I bet no one has seen this in a really long time, but now they're going to be able to see it. We have been working on, it's called a finding aid, but it's a guide. And right now it's probably about 50 pages long, but we're going to break it up. And it'll be a PDF, and it really outlines what is here, what is in this office, so that if you were to come in and say, I'm looking for information about my relative who was here in the 1850s, we could say, all right, look at our guide here. This is the information we have on residents in the 1850s. We have street lists. We have maybe voting lists. We have all these different things so that people can find what they're looking for. Whereas before, we kind of like, I can take a look, So it's going to streamline the process, and it already has. We've had people come in that we've been able to help, and we've been able to say, oh, yep, absolutely, worked on that last week. Here you go. So it's really been fabulous. at the library with the exhibit that we did, we've had teachers approach us and say, I'm going to use this in my classroom. For the online exhibit, from the records that we put up there, we can use it for, we had one teacher who's going to use it for the Industrial Revolution, for the Civil War, all these different things for his 5th grade class. I believe it was 5th grade. And so what I've been really trying to emphasize to people is that this is a project that we're working on right now, but it's really a program. It's a program that is meant to emphasize the legacy of this town, everybody's legacy. We talk about records from the 1850s. That's great. We have these records. That's fantastic. But the records that are being created today, those are the historical records of tomorrow. So this is something that's important, not just to me, not just to Eileen, but to everybody, every single resident in this town. Everyone who was not even necessarily living here, who maybe grew up here but has moved away and wants to know what's going on now or what has happened when they were a child. This is like just a huge opportunity and something that I would hate to see stopped and that I would hate to see not continue into the future.
Could you discuss how the funds are actually being spent?
Sure. I'm sorry, did I?
Is it primarily salaries?
It's a couple different things. We've been focusing a lot on different types of supplies that we need. There's, especially for oversized materials, there's a lot of maps. And that can get quite expensive, and so we're looking at economical ways of properly preserving materials. And that's something that it varies month by month depending on what we're working on. But we are now working on the maps, and we're starting to get a list of how much exactly we are going to spend and willing to spend on that. So supplies, salaries are really the two big things.
So the budget, as a project manager, it seems like it's about maybe a third supplies, because as I say, the supplies are very expensive, and about 2/3 are for salaries to do this work.
I try to be frugal when it comes to supplies, because they can be very expensive, and I know we have a limited supply of money, and you have so many projects. So I do try to look at many different places and find the best price for the best quality.
Refresh our memories, because I know this has been an ongoing project. What kind of funds that you've asked for and we've given to you thus far, so that we have an idea of because this is the final phase, correct?
Yes.
It is the final phase, and I'm not sure of the amount of money that we've used. I'm sorry. This is the third phase, and it should be the final phase.
And looking at, because this is all about the money, we did talk and saw that we're funding this right on the nose, so that's why we're able to cut it by $10,000. We don't have extra money floating in the account, so we discussed it, and that's why the request was asked to be reduced by $10,000. So there's not a lot of extra opportunity money in there.
Actually, if you look at your CPC projects to date, the information is there.
Oh, it is?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
What is the amount?
And I know that we've been very flexible about this over the years in terms of your carefully just asking for what you needed. Because
And I'm not suggesting they aren't. I was just trying to get a full picture of what it has cost up to this time.
When do you think you'll ask for a permanent person and move it into the operating budget?
I'm glad you asked.
She didn't even pay me to ask that.
We're going to be working on that this year, because we feel as though there is a need for someone that could handle the records for the town, and also an archivist, someone that would be able to look through our records and see what would be kept for historical records, and just to keep our records in line. Because I found that I have a pile in my office that I have to go through that need to be thrown away, but I'd like to look through them first before they're thrown away. So please don't come into my office. It looks like something exploded in it, but you can add to that too. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think that we've been talking about it for the past past several months, actually, different ways that the position, where it would be placed. Would it be a department? Would it be a single position? And so, we've been talking with other towns and cities in and around Massachusetts that have this type of program, and how have they handled it? What challenges did they face? What kind of pros and cons do they have for the way that they have structured it? And I think that's an important part, is to have that basis for saying, this is why we want to do it this way. We don't want to just throw it out there. We want to do this because we do. We want to have a structured plan on how and why this should happen. And so we have a couple different things that we're working on.
And we don't want to just stop and then have everything just fall away and not have anything continue. I think it would be nice if we were able to have someone that could either be a position in the town or however we can handle having that person here. Thanks for asking.
Any other questions or comments? Gary?
One question that I have is, I'm thrilled that you're going to be working very soon on the records of the planning board, and which is near and dear to my heart. What I'm trying to find out is, once you cull through the actual documents, the paper documents, is there a way that records can be scanned so that we could have digital access to some of these? If, let's say, you're researching a certain decision or you're researching a certain action, you could go back in time on the inventory, and then you could find the document electronically. Is that something that we could do as part of this?
I would say for this coming year, that probably wouldn't be something that we could do for larger documents like the planning board, the maps that they have. However, there are a lot of different ways that can be done through a content management system or a records management system, and it does make it a lot easier, not only for people within the department, but also the people in the public. If they can have access to that, it's absolutely feasible. For a position that would continue, there are lots of grants that you can go for that. There are lots of different ways, but absolutely, and that would be something that I would definitely want to pursue in the future. And I'm sure anybody who might fill the shoes of an archivist, records manager, would absolutely want to go through the route of digitization.
Anything else? Questions or comments from the public? Anything else you'd like to add? Best discovery of the last year?
A one?
The best one.
The best 5 discoveries of the last year?
I have to say the best discovery I think I found was a key from the Cushing House Hotel. And it's an old key from the 1880s, 1890s, and it has the label number 3 Cushing House Hotel with the little number. It's just absolutely fabulous. I always go and I look at it. I don't know. I just have a thing for objects personally, but I love everything. But the Cushing House in particular, I've always found to be absolutely interesting. Not only because George Cushing. Sorry, I could go on and on, but that has been my biggest find.
She also found out what an interesting person Jack Studley was. Yeah. Jack Studley. What an interesting person he was. She's found a lot of paperwork a lot of letters.
It's interesting the link to the hotel, because Robert Menzies used to talk about when they were kids, the folks would go to the Cushing House for the winter. Not that, a couple generations back. And now it's the post office.
Yeah.
Keep your eyes open. Keep finding things.
Yeah, definitely.
Thanks for all the wonderful work you do and for coming to see us for this proposal.
Thank you.
Thank you for what you've done for us in the past, and hopefully in the future.
And our next agenda item that we're a little early on is the Hingham Affordable Housing Trust. Jim, is Tim White coming?
I think Tim is at another.
I saw him in the building.
Oh, he's in another meeting?
He's in another meeting until 8.
He was next to
He's in the building.
He's in the house.
Can we have the Congo Church?
Is everybody here, Kathy, for the Congregational Church? We're ready to go on that? Want to? Did you want Roger here?
I think we can do this. He said he was coming as of today.
I mean, we're happy to wait if. Yeah, I think we should wait. Maybe we can take a brief recess and see if we can spot Tim White.
He looks like a lawyer.
We just have Gary.
Oh, the Liberty Plain Cemetery.
You want to do that?
Everyone is here.
Okay.
Everyone else is
Is
dead.
everyone here?
You don't think 20 members of the public are going to show up at 8:45 for this?
And unanimously support, I trust.
Well, why don't we?
We can do the 875 Main Street right now.
Why don't we do Liberty Plain Cemetery then?
Oh, and then 875.
Yeah, clean up the bottom too.
We're allowed to be ahead of schedule.
Okay.
I'd like to introduce the Liberty Plain Cemetery Conservation Project Phase 3. I'm on the committee, the Liberty Plain Cemetery Association, which is a small committee which manages a very small private nonprofit historical cemetery in South Hingham at 990 Main Street. It's about a half a block north of Gardner Street on the east side of the street behind a wrought iron fence. Just so that people know, some people think it's a well-kept secret, and we don't try intentionally to have it be that way. And what we have been doing for approximately the last 10 or so years is essentially restoring the monuments and the markers in the cemetery. This cemetery was formed in 1755 by 9 significant original settling families in South Hingham, some names of which are very familiar: the Whitings, the Gardners, Chubbicks, Lorings, Jacobs. And what they did is, as a group, they formed this burial ground, which would then consolidate all of the very small cemeteries which are located in the original farms and the original family plots. They removed them from the farms and consolidated them here in the cemetery. So following the completion of the Liberty Plain Cemetery's gravestone monument condition assessment in 2011, we had arranged a consultancy with Fannin Lehner Preservation Consultants, who had undertaken 2 previous phases of gravestone monument conservation in the cemetery. In Phase 1, the focus was on the early veterans' stones, the markers in the cemetery. Phase 2 continued the work begun in Phase 1, and just about all of the veteran stones have been finished, and the conservation of 7 obelisks and 30 to 35 of the original settlers' stones is nearing completion. And both phases have been based on the recommendations of the original condition assessment, which we did of all of the stones and markers in the cemetery. As a result of doing the research, we had spent about 2 years updating and digitizing all of the records of the cemetery, so we have very complete records going back to, we also have all the original quill book documents that were done in the 1700s. As a result of doing all of this research and updating relative to the veterans' stones, we found that there were an additional 60-plus veterans in the cemetery who the town did not have the appropriate records on. So as a result of this, a lateral yield was to basically now have all these records updated, so on Memorial Day all the markers and the flags can be placed appropriately. With Phase 2 approaching the completion, it's time to consider Phase 3. A substantial number of the Liberty Plains historic and artistic markers have been conserved, but many more are broken and tilted as a result of weather and exposure and just aging, and thereby are in need of a number of procedures such as resetting, mortaring into the bases, removing the previous repairs, adhesive repair, repinning, drilling and blind pinning, capping, cleaning, and casting new bases. Due to this complexity, the time requirements for the proper conservation of these artifacts are substantial. So Phase 3 of the conservation program will be comprised of 40 to 50 gravestones and monuments which memorialize the 17th, 18th, and 19th century early settlers of the Hingham community. And this is being done by Fannin Lehner Preservation Consultants, who are, I think, foremost in their field in terms of restoring these kinds of burial ground markers, and have been doing this in many cemeteries in New England and even in the Midwest for about 30 years. What we are requesting is a professional fee for 45 to 50 gravestone and monument restoration described above of $23,000. This includes all the time and all the expenses. The cemetery supplies all of the materials for this work. We do not ask the CPC for that. The sand and the pea stone and any of the water and other kinds of materials that we need. And the remaining monies are on the stones to restore and or replace any of the cast iron or the wrought iron or the bronze markers that the flags are set in. So we have a certain, as we're restoring these stones, we're finding that a number of these markers are broken or they're gone. So we're restoring them and replacing those too as we do the stones if they're veterans. So the total amount is $24,750 that we're requesting from the CPC.
And as the project manager, I guess I'll just comment on our site visit, which was fascinating in terms of the history of Hingham, the great order which exists within the cemetery. My hat is off to Gary, who, along with the members of the Liberty Plain Cemetery Association, have essentially done an incredible job of volunteer work of preserving significant historic asset of the town of Hingham. And to see the names on the memorials, it really is walking through the pages of Hingham history. Probably a good part of Buckettown is associated with Liberty Plain Cemetery, and it's a tremendous project. So,
if anybody hasn't seen Phase 2, I was happy when we took the walk through, but if you go back now, they have done more cleaning, and some of the larger monuments that looked like they were gray, they are now white. They're alabaster. They're absolutely gorgeous. Gorgeous. Why is this the last phase?
Well, it's
You didn't
the third.
believe
I
it,
didn't
did
say
you?
it was the last.
Never mind.
I was reserving my rights to do that. It's
Okay.
maintenance and preserving a significant artifact like this is really essentially a lifetime effort. We hope to
I got it.
pass this on to future generations.
I got it.
any other comments or questions?
Great stuff.
Any comments or questions from members of the public? Gary, thank you very much.
Thank you for
All
doing
right.
this.
And I see that Tim White has dragged himself away from another meeting, as I understand it. And
They do.
Welcome.
Right next door.
welcome
You
to
guys are raising quite a racket over here, by the way. Happy New Year to everybody.
and the same to you. And this is the Hingham Affordable Housing Trust Opportunity Funding Proposal.
Thank you.
I hope you're going to give us an executive summary of this.
Yes, you got a very brief summary there.
Not that brief.
So the trust has put an application in requesting $175,000 for
essentially two purposes. One is what we called last year when we came before you, which was the opportunity funding, and then secondly, as additional funding for our Selectmen's Parcel project. So I'll talk about both, start with the opportunity funding, because I think we've got a great work in progress right now with the funds that you so graciously awarded us last year. We purchased Unit H of 4 Beals Cove, and we purchased it in the spring, and we have put an application in with DHCD to get that unit designated as a permanently affordable unit that would go into our affordable housing inventory here in Hingham. That application is pending. I spoke with we have a consultant who's helping us with that process, MCO, to ask them for an update as to when they anticipated us getting at least a response on it. And they do believe it's imminent. It probably is going to be a little bit slower than it might be because of the change of administrations. Going from the Patrick administration to the Baker administration will probably slow it down a little bit. But she didn't feel as though it would make a huge amount of delay. We have done some very modest improvements to it. When we purchased it, we knew it needed a new upgrade on its electrical panel. We had that work done. There's a tiny bit of cosmetic work that needs to be done. We'll have it all ready to go as soon as the DHCD acts on our application. Once they do that, then MCO will take it to the next step, which is to market it in accordance with the affordable housing regulations with a lottery and actually sell the unit to a qualified buyer. And that will be the first time we've done it as a trust, which we're very excited about, because this is sort of the process that we're looking forward to doing, working with you folks going forward as a terrific way of expanding our affordable housing inventory. The nice thing about it is that you get units, could be anywhere in the town. So as opposed to designating them in one particular location, they get sprinkled throughout the community. And I think that's a healthy and a good positive thing for our town. Once it's designated, we have one less housing unit we need to have in order to reach the 10%. We are at 6.3%. So we still have a ways to go. We've got a little bit of work to do. But we're excited about the work that we do, and we think we can get us there.
There are differing viewpoints on...
I think the town...
Let's put it this way. DHCD says we're at 6.3%.
The town's position is that we have met our 10%.
Right.
We have to say that.
Right. Absolutely. So that's sort of the first part of the puzzle. And last time we purchased the unit, we used it was about $158,000. So we see this amount of money as a reasonable amount of money to facilitate us in making a purchase going forward. However, we also wanted to include in this request that we have the opportunity to use some of the funding with our Selectmen's Parcel. And that's in Section B of the little section of the submission that I've given to you. And as you folks may be aware, this is a result of a town meeting vote. The Board of Selectmen have asked the trust to proceed with coming up with a plan as to how we can develop the parcel and for affordable housing. There are some limitations that were put on us by town meeting, which is that town meeting said we're looking for anywhere between 20 and 40 units. So that's a pretty good size range, but we've got over 12 acres of land, so we've got a significant amount of space to space them out. And rather than Beale Street, the affordable units were 80% of the median income level. Town meeting wanted a more mixed community there. So they've said 50%, 80%, 100%, and even 120% of the area's median income. What that means is well, let's see, I brought some numbers with me just so that you folks have kind of an idea of what that entails. So 100% of the median income for one person for the town of Hingham is $65,900 a year in income.
Is it just the town or is it the region?
It's the region, but it's the Boston, Cambridge, Quincy region, including Hingham. For a household size of 4 persons, 100% of the median would be $94,000. So this concept the town meeting came up with of mixing it, I think, is a healthy one and makes the project easier to develop, I think, because we have some higher side numbers that we can work with. Now, the meeting I just came from, we just had our Union Studios in with us, who is the consultant that we are about to retain to help us do the development of the property. We went through an RFP and came down to several very qualified consultants, and at our last meeting we voted to work with Union Studios. Tonight they provided us with a proposed contract under which we're going to work with, which we, as the trust members, will review. We'll also ship it out to council for a review by council as well. Once we hopefully wrap that up in the next month, we will actually start the process of the pre-development process of the selectmen's parcel. Now, last year we came before you, we received $175,000 dedicated to the selectmen's parcel. Those funds will be absorbed by this contract. So
with Union Studios.
With Union Studios. Yeah. So that gets the ball rolling for us. It puts a professional in our, to work with. But as we go forward, our experience at 80 Beale Street has proven that there are additional costs, no matter how you look at it. You've got legal fees, you've got permitting fees, and there's always something that comes up. And as opposed to being able to tell you exactly how much money we're going to need to develop this property, I thought it might be a good idea to give you folks a copy of the summary of the 80 Beale Street project, which is Exhibit 4. And what this gives you is, all the money's in and all the money's out. It's a spreadsheet that was done by our treasurer at that time, and you can see in there that the types of additional costs that we are now concerned about going forward and that we will likely incur in this calendar year are identified in the expense section of legal, permit fees, pre-40B work, etc. The good
Some
news,
of these were to acquire this property, which the selectmen's parcel we already own.
well, that's a good point, and let me actually get to that right now, because the CPC gave us $150,000 to purchase that property. We actually got a mortgage on that property, but even going through that process, and the purchase price was $400,000. When all of the payments were made, all the expenses that we incurred to develop this property, the town of Hingham created 2 permanently affordable units for approximately $30,000 each. That is a terrific end result for our community. You just can't do that. I mean, just the other example, we're going to purchase, Beale Cove for $150. We use CPC money. Now we're going to sell it. We're not going to sell it for $150 because of the affordable limitations. And it probably will cost us a little bit more than $30,000 in the end, but not a lot more. But to only have to pay, for this community, to pay $30,000 to create an affordable unit in this town is remarkable, especially in the town of Hingham. I mean, just be with property values what they are. So,
in Exhibit 4, how many units are realized in this pro forma?
2 affordable.
These are 2.
2.
Okay. And in the affordable units, in terms of the demographics, What is the typical demand of the size of the household, and how does that relate to the numbers of bedrooms that you would aim for in creating a unit to meet the demand?
You mean going forward with the selectmen's parcel?
Yeah.
We don't know with the selectmen's parcel at this point. I mean, that's why we've hired the consultant. And we're going to have to figure out, there's a consultant, is the architects, they are engineers, and they're also affordable housing consultants, folks that work with what programs are available to finance the projects, what types of units do we need to, single family, duplexes, whatever the programs have that actually have monies available. So, at this point, we will be working with our consultant, who will meet with our community, with the planning board, with the zoning board, with conservation, with police, with fire, with the neighbors. And it will be a community effort to figure out what works best for this parcel. The good news is we have over 12 acres of land to work with.
Tim, will they look at what the community needs?
Absolutely.
And work with elder services, because the largest need we have is for senior citizen housing.
Everything is on the table, absolutely, positively.
But I mean, who decides? I mean, who decides?
Well,
Is it going to be families? Is it going to be seniors? Is it going to be something else?
The trust's job, I guess.
that's I mean,
So you
what
guys
we'll
are-
do is
you
this,
guys are
is
gonna
we will
decide.
get the input from the consultants. We'll get the input from the community, and then the trust will select the proposal that we think works best.
How will you get the input from the community?
We'll be meeting with the various folks that I just talked about, including police chief, fire chief, conservation, planning board, zoning board, selectmen,
So will the
and
police know what the housing needs are for the town?
and town planner. Yeah, we'll meet with anybody.
Tim,
And we will also have public meetings for the neighbors.
just in terms of this year's proposal,
Yep.
how long is, it was my understanding that the 175 for the selectmen's parcel that we gave you last year
Right.
was basically to cover the planning cost, and then it was going to be turned over to a developer to actually do the development. So some of these costs on Beals Cove aren't the same kind of costs that, for the selectmen's parcel, right?
No, they are.
They
They're
are.
exactly the same.
How long is the planning process going to take? Is the 175?
I actually just had their proposed schedule. It's next door. I could bring it in. But their goal is to have a plan in place with approvals, with a friendly 40B or a 40B that we will sponsor as a trust by the end of the year. Then it will.
By the end of 2015.
2015. Then we will put it out to bid for a developer, which is exactly what we did with 80 Beale.
So how much of the 175 that you're asking for this year do you want for the selectmen's parcel?
Well, I mean, I didn't ask for a specific amount, and that's why I draw your attention to Exhibit 4. This obviously was a smaller project, but you can see what the legal in there was. These are fees that were separate from the actual development team that we're going to have to pay. We're going to have permit fees. We're going to have legal fees. We may have traffic study fees, those types of things that aren't part of our consultant's package. That's the same way we did it with 80 Beale.
Well, I mean,
And in 80 Beale, I can tell you what the numbers were.
yeah, but I mean, do you know the actual dollar amount of the contract with the consultant?
I do.
And how much is that?
It's 173.5.
Did they know there was 175,000 available?
Well, that's a good question. If they did their homework and knew what we came before CPC, they weren't local, so I don't think they weren't in the audience. Let's put it that way.
I mean, it
Public documents.
seems to me that we should be breaking this out between the two different items.
Because the
And-
original intent of the opportunity funding was to find other Beals Cove units, small houses, and buy them up.
And that may very well what happens with these funds. I'm not saying that I'm thinking that if we need another $10,000 for legal fees, that's nice to know that the money is there.
Didn't we ask this to be a combined warrant, a combined proposal? Weren't there two?
No, it was.
That was last year?
That was
That was last year, there were two separate proposals. And this year, there was mention of the selectmen's parcel early on, but it really wasn't broken out, and it seemed like opportunity funding was the main part of what you were asking.
And I anticipate it will be the main part, Bob.
Let me ask, you're anticipating selling the unit that you bought with with money.
Yep.
That's going to come back to the Affordable Housing Trust.
Right.
Now, I don't know that remains forever designated as CPC funds. I suppose maybe we'd even need town council to opine on that. But if you get that money back, it seems to me you would probably have flexibility conceivably to use that. Have you looked at that at all?
Yep. No, you're absolutely right. I mean, but we also would have flexibility to use it to purchase another unit. And I think that that's the flexibility that the trust is looking for, is that if something else comes up, somebody says, my goodness, we got this property over in, Crow Point that is just perfect for the trust. We want to be able to have the sufficient. We need another, according to DHCD, we need another 300 units, folks, to escape from unfriendly 40Bs.
Well,
so we got our work cut out for us.
If out of the 175 you're asking for, you wanted us to break out some part for the selectmen's parcel, could you tell us what you'd feel comfortable with?
I'd feel comfortable with $25,000.
Okay.
And I think if you look at Exhibit 4, that gives you a basis for that number, a reasonable basis for that number.
Okay.
So Tim, on Exhibit 4, if 2 units are realized, and it's about $350,000 a unit if I'm looking at the center column at the bottom, to develop those units, to put those on the list, on the inventory, does that mean that, are those units purchased?
Purchased for about they were purchased for about $185,000.
So the unit is purchased for $185,000, and that eligibility is a function of the percent of the mean income?
Correct, 80%.
So if I'm trying to equate, in the town, there are very few housing opportunities in the $250,000 to $350,000 range. And let's say that the mean income that would be required to support that would put that in an affordable category from what I could see in terms of eligibility. Are we creating a $350,000 unit for $150,000 or $175,000 and thereby it's sold for the $175,000? I'm trying to understand the model. So what that says is that there's additional reach here because this is subsidized. There's additional reach in terms of a household of limited means to be able to buy this kind of a house in a typical neighborhood.
And in fact, they have to qualify.
Have to qualify.
Yep.
So in terms of the subsidy, we yielded 2, so it's really $350,000 was the net cost after all of this pro forma is done on those 2 units. Is that what you're saying?
In other words, I'm not following you on that.
Each unit was net cost was $175,000 to develop each unit.
Oh no. What we did is, which is what we'll do with this project, is we sold the project to a developer. The developer built 8 units, 6 of which were market. So he's, and we actually tried to get him to do 3 affordable, but the money, the profit wasn't there for him, so that we couldn't get anyone to bite on that. So 2 was the amount we could get. So he makes his money on the 6 market rate units. Right. And
so that's what I was referring to as the subsidy. His 6 market
really
rates subsidized these, lowered the cost, and the net yield was for $175,000 net, 2 units.
Yeah, I was 85 or something like that.
Okay, so $185,000 each. So for $370,000, we have 2 net units.
Yeah.
And thereby then they're sold at the $185,000.
Correct.
Are they restricted in value?
Permanently.
Or permanently at a certain index? So 5 years from now, the owners of these properties sell these properties, they can only sell it for 175?
Correct. Well, it might be 180.
185 or whatever the...
Right.
So it's
It's all
indexed
it's all
forever?
relegated by the program.
And they can only sell it to somebody that's qualified.
Again, somebody who's qualified. Yep.
I do want to be mindful of time again. And, sure.
One is a really good point Tim has made, that a lot of these projects rely on skewed rents or skewed sales prices to, quote, subsidize them. They aren't subsidized out of the public pocket. And that's, only a minority are. And then, Irma, on your comment about the elderly housing, speaking for the Housing Authority, almost all of our units are elderly or handicapped. Just a handful of family units at the back. And we get a lot of family applications. Mm-hmm. And also, an elderly person, I believe, could live in a one-bedroom, two-bedroom of the selectmen's parcel units. It doesn't have to be labeled elderly to be appropriate. I'm a elderly person. I live in a two-story house with stairs. I manage them every day, and everything doesn't have to be labeled elderly housing if it's affordable and if it's an appropriate size, so that we aren't ignoring people. We aren't ignoring the bulge of aging boomers, but there are other resources, and family rental is quite scarce, and family affordable mid-price is quite scarce. And I think it's really good that you're going for that range. Some people will criticize that you're leaving behind the really people with the greatest needs, but you're making a community out of it.
It's a mixed group, and I think that's important. And I think the town looked at it. That's the way the town looked at it when they voted at the town meeting. So.
Further comments or questions? Comments or questions? Lucy?
Lucy Hancock, Advisory Committee. Just a clarification, are we talking about indicating how much for each part of this, or just calling it opportunity funding? Well, I'm just thinking ahead to, I don't think it would be clear if we just said opportunity funding 175,000 when we're talking about probably spending some on the selectmen's parcel, and we're not quite sure how much.
Affordable housing funding,
I think we'll have to talk about that next Wednesday night in terms of voting as to making a designation between the two parts of the request or not. And if we do make such a designation, we may have to split this into two warrant article recommendations.
Especially with regard to last year, where we had two separate articles clearly labeled Selectmen's Parcel and Opportunity Funding.
Right.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
I would remind you all, in Exhibit 5 is the Article 39. You probably all remember the 2012 annual town meeting that kind of redid how we do our reporting financially. And it's so transparent that and Exhibit 4 is a good example of how transparent we were even before we entered into this new accounting. But every penny that the trust spends is identified with the assistance of Sue Nickerson of the town, and it's so transparent. It's great. So.
If there's nothing further, thank you very much, Tim. And
thanks, folks.
Thanks the trust for all the great work they do. And back to the Congregational Church. And you're being televised, so if you could introduce yourselves for our viewing audience.
Hi, I'm Kathy Blair, Hingham Congregational Church, and I have
Roger Hoyt, church member and architect.
And
Mark Minister, church treasurer.
And
Isn't it?
that's right. And we hope to have Rev Pete here with us tonight, but he had a conflict, so will not be able to join us. But hopefully we can answer all your questions. So we're here looking for financial help in constructing a handicapped ramp for our church. What our goal is, dignified access for all to our sanctuary for weddings, funerals, community events, concerts, Sunday worship, etc. And Roger has developed a great plan that we think will look beautiful, and we are asking for just a portion of what we consider, what we believe the cost will be from you all. And Mark can help you if you have any financial questions about how we would pay for this and so forth, and Roger can help you with construction questions. From my point of view, it hit me on the head pretty hard this summer that we don't have dignified access. We have access, but it's not dignified. I was at a wedding at our church. A friend of ours' daughter got married, and during the recessional, as the bride and groom were leaving the church, and we all got up to follow her out to the front of the church where we were going to be throwing flower petals on her and so forth, the bride's great aunt, actually, is who it was on her walker hobbling toward the front of the sanctuary. And I very proudly said to her and her companion, "We have an elevator in the back, and it, can take you down to the parking lot in the back." And I was so proud that we could help her with access. And she looked at me funny, and I had met her before, lovely lady, and her companion said, "Why would she want to go out the back when her grandniece is in the front?" And so that is why we're looking to do this. We also, as I said, we have access. We have an elevator. It breaks down from time to time. And I'm told by our trustees that they don't make the parts anymore for this old elevator. So at some point in our long-range thinking, we are going to have to replace that elevator, and we will do that. But handicapped ramps don't break down. So that's a very good permanent solution for our church. And as I said, we do a lot of things in our church for the community, with the community. We invite the community, and we do things outside our church as well. Where Mark is very involved in Taste of Hingham, which is something that our church does. Pine Street Inn meals and so on and so forth. There's a lot of things, and I know that's in our application, some of the things that we do. So that's why we're here.
Do you want to add anything at this point, Roger?
Only that we have applied to the Historic Commission, and we are actually scheduled for the 29th, I think, at the districts, right?
Just for design approval.
Correct.
Right.
But I think there was
Andrea Young has told me that she doesn't anticipate that that's going to be any kind of issue, or even if some design alterations were asked for, they're not likely to be costly.
But is one of the steps that we have to take in order to meet all our regulations.
Exactly. Kathleen, you're the project manager. Anything you wanted to add?
No, I think they've done a great job in terms of the design, keeping the cost down, and also kind of meeting one of our sort of unwritten rules about doing the majority of their own funding.
Yeah, your request remains at $20,000, and the total project cost is?
80, as we see it at this point.
So they're certainly contributing their
So
share.
it's higher than the original estimate, which is on the application of like 55.
Yes, that's correct. We did get several contractors with the preliminary drawings that we have to come in and give us, one was about 76, I think, and one is at like 82, so we're around that $80,000 mark and feel comfortable with that.
You'll be doing construction this summer?
That was our hope, because it's summer, the church actually, any of the services are held downstairs, not up in the sanctuary. This would be a great time to be able to get that work done, so that come back in the fall with all the activities in the fall, that we would have it done and finished.
And you're confident that your fundraising will permit that to happen with $20,000 from the CPC?
Well, that will be, we'll learn the answer to that this spring. We're going to do a capital campaign for a number of things that need done, that we have put off, and this would be included in that. So we're confident, but not overconfident, as one shouldn't be in these types of things.
Is the design still the simple design that you walked us all through when we made the site visit?
Yes. We just received all the data from the surveyor, and I was off by a couple of inches, which is it's great to know. But everything that we've shown on that document is doable. And so we're very comfortable with the design solution.
Questions or comments from the committee?
So there are some estimates that you've obtained from contractors already?
Yes, based on the preliminary drawings that I think we submitted to you.
The drawings we have, the estimates we don't. I don't know if we've received the
Yeah,
estimates.
that was just in the last couple of weeks around
Okay.
the holidays. So I can get those
Okay.
into you so you have the documentation for that.
The sooner the better, because meeting next Wednesday, we're actually voting on recommendations. So if you could have them to Carol tomorrow, if possible.
Okay. And the ramp itself is just a wood structure?
No, it's granite on the face to match all the granite on the church itself, and then the actual ramp is concrete with cast iron railings to match the existing railings. And then, of course, there's the handicap rail that's set underneath the main rail.
Okay.
Yes.
So there's, at a glance, you see the main steps. The second glance, you realize it's the way up.
Yes, that's correct.
Oh, it does.
Other questions or comments?
The only other question I had is, there are two handicap parking spaces out front of the ramp. Are they part of this project, or are they part of the capital renewal project at the church?
There's been a great deal of discussion about about those spaces. Part of the problem there, of course, is the fact that Main Street is 228 is a state highway. However, there is precedent, which I didn't realize. So there are several places on 228 where there's actually handicap spots designated on the street adjacent to the sidewalk. That would be a much better solution, certainly for us, than having to take that very small part of the grass area in front of the church. So we are pursuing that as another alternative.
So the spaces on the north side or northwest side of the church, just in front of the ramp would be perfect.
Right.
Yeah, I would say that would be a definite improvement to preserve the nice lawn streetscape in front of the church.
Yeah, we had a lot of conversation through the church members about that.
The Christian Science Church, which is sort of diagonally across, also on 228, has a handicap parking sign right on 228 in front of their church. So,
in terms of lighting, is the ramp going to be lit at night? Would there be bollard lights or rail lights or something on the ramp at night, or?
There's actually light on the front of the church, as well as, of course, at night had the spotlight, the ground light. So that would certainly light the entire ramp area, but you also get very good light from the actual building light.
So looking at the elevation of the church, the original stairs would be moved slightly forward, but everything would be as originally, as you see it now with the Quincy granite and...
Yeah, we're basically raising it up. So that top step, which is 6.5 inches down from the level of the floor in the sanctuary, that whole thing will be lifted up. And we're using all those beautiful 11-foot long single pieces of granite. And they are 15 inches wide. So it's a terrific step. So we're using all that material, and we've found a way actually to be able to match the granite that's on the foundation locally. So we're very positive about that piece of it, and that will be the sloped area facing of the ramp itself. And then I think, as Jim was saying, there's planting all out in front, which will hide that. And I think visually, I think there are a couple of elevations on our package that we sent to you which show the spire and the whole front of the church is really not being adversely affected, I think, at all.
Other questions or comments?
I just got a notice about getting approval from the congregation. It was listed in here. I guess, did that happen? Is that a...
we're a congregational church, and that means the congregation makes all the decisions and is the governing body of our church. And we have some other things, as Mark mentioned, there are other approvals that need to happen in the near future, other building projects that we're working on too. We haven't done a building project for quite some time. Our kitchen needs to be renovated fairly desperately, and some other things need to happen. So we're sort of pulling this all together. We'll be reaching out to the congregation in the spring with all our designs and all the information and so forth. I think that our chances of getting an approval will be far better if we have a little bit of funding already. So, but we will probably, the town meeting, I believe, is in April, and we'll probably have something in front of the congregation and have approval before then. But I'm not concerned about that happening. The congregation actually has asked for this. What we did was a long-range planning process that took us about a year, and we reached out to every person, every group, every committee in the congregation, and one of the top things that bubbled up to the surface that people are looking for is the dignified access for all. So they've already asked for this, so I'm sure they'll approve it.
Thank you all. Thanks, Kathy. Thanks, Roger.
Thank you.
Thank you. And on to the Lincoln School elevator.
Come on, Tom. We're not going to let him hide in the back.
Exactly. There will be repeat broadcasts of this.
I've had the opportunity to meet all of you. This is Tom Shanley. He's our secretary on the board of managers.
Could you introduce yourself, Dick, for
I'm sorry.
Viewing audience?
Dick Mason, and I chair the Lincoln School Apartments Board of Managers for the Affordable Housing Trust.
Great, thank you.
Did everybody get the revised budget? Terrific.
Yes.
So you have the most current.
Folders that people.
Good. So what I can report is that I think you were aware that we had been forced to some emergency work on the project. Is that something we've talked about with you?
Yes.
So the good news is that work was completed. It was completed early in December. There is a new comptroller in place. Cross fingers, it's working well, and we've had no problems subsequent to that. So that portion of the project has been completed and was funded from our own reserves. Other than that, that didn't have a particularly material impact on the total cost of the project. The updated three-phase bid was within $5,000 in aggregate of where the total cost was to have been originally. So we are still at a total cost of just under $280,000 to do this project. And you have the rest of the background on it, and we'd be pleased to answer your questions.
Let me add, I did talk to Tim White. We probably shouldn't have let him escape.
Yeah.
Notice how quickly he left.
Right.
I did have an extended conversation with Tim and asked if, when they meet again, that they maximize the amount of money that the Housing Trust will give to Lincoln School Apartments for the elevator project. And they're going to be talking about that. I'm not sure when they're meeting. Yeah.
I understand they have a meeting next week.
Next week. So I know we will get money. I don't know how much, but I did plead the case.
I mean, I know we talked about what we can legally cover, and I don't know, Bob, if you're putting your legal hat on as you look at this list as to what are capital costs that we can fund, and I see the delineation of the 4258, so.
The things that I had questions about were the rent loss, the HUD subsidy loss, and the soft cost contingency, as to whether that could be viewed as...
Well, and the staffing costs, I don't know if that's a...
Well, I have questions about whether the staffing costs are related, I'm assuming, but don't know, are they related to the construction? So maybe if we
Every
take a look
cost
at,
here relates to the construction.
where you say construction costs, under that bold heading.
Yeah.
The remaining elevator contract, that's actually for the actual work to do the elevator replacement.
Yes.
And the other trades, that's directly involved in that work.
Yes.
And the contingency, that's just a standard construction contingency.
Yep.
Then when we get to soft costs, the elevator consultant, is that somebody that is directly involved with the construction?
We don't have anyone on our board that's competent to make judgments about what that contract should look like and what the specifications should be for this. So, for instance, you would normally expect to pay an architect to do work on a project, and you'd regard that as an eligible project cost, I hope.
I mean, is that something, I don't know, I'm looking at Roger, is that something that you have that expertise, or?
No, I don't think that, certainly Dick and the folks that are working with him that don't have this expertise are going to need someone to put together a bid spec and undertake the advertisement and so they, and I'm talking about strictly the elevator consulting cost, and then and I assume in association with that, this person's coming in, making sure, doing some construction administrative work, so they're going to come in, and so it's just not design and spec. They'll come in, right? So, so the elevator doesn't even happen, I think, without having an understanding of the work. Yeah, at some point, I would imagine this person's checking to make sure that the work's being done properly. So that one, I don't think is a problem.
The project.
Typically what we do when we're renovating an elevator, which this project would be renovating this elevator, typically what we do is we bring in a specialist who essentially knows all of the specialty expertise issues on doing the elevators, and we have them write the spec around that, and we can then we can actually then spec and bid that work, and also coordinate and manage the installation of that work. And given that it's a renovation and there are upgrading requirements for this person typically knows the industry better than anybody else. And we found if we didn't do that, it just wasn't going to get coordinated properly.
That's helpful.
And if you need a recommendation for somebody, like I can give you a couple of names for people who do
Who's the company that we have been doing this? Do you remember offhand? I'm sorry, we just don't remember the name, but
There's a
they
company,
did.
Lurch Bates is one of them. There's 2 or 3 companies in Boston that do it.
Yep. They have a contract with us that will handle everything from bid specifications, design, to weekly meetings and project oversight.
Project management fee for Corcoran?
Yeah, Corcoran has to manage this project.
Does that include managing the relocation?
Yes, a lot of the soft Corcoran costs relate to the relocation.
Okay, so that probably is not something that we can fund.
Let me understand why you can't fund that.
We consulted the CPA Coalition concerning a historic preservation project. And we can use funds for historic preservation to preserve historic structures and to rehabilitate or restore them. But there's nothing in the Community Preservation Act that would indicate we can use CPA funds to provide substitute housing or temporary housing or anything of that nature.
Well, is there an argument that this is a cost we don't have to incur? Does anyone believe that we don't have to incur this cost?
Oh.
No, but it doesn't mean we can pay for it with CPA funds.
Great. So I think what we do, most grant sources don't restrict the total cost per se. They restrict where their funds can go. So if you want to simply eliminate from your funding these line items that you don't believe can be used for that, then we'll apply your funds to all of the other line items.
I think that's why we're going through this exercise.
That's why we're
exactly.
That's why we're asking these questions.
If you're going to cut us to 42%,
We probably are, but we haven't got there yet.
Okay.
Yeah, we're just going through what we
You know,
can
if
cover
we can-
and then figure out the 42% of that.
If we can kind of go down the,
But I'll just, for whatever it's worth, because you just gave somebody $175,000, they're not going to build anything. It's all soft costs, and it's costs relating to how they get to build their project. And I would argue with you that this is a very necessary cost to this project.
well, again, they're under a different bucket, a bucket that, or category that maybe it would be nice for you to be under, namely the community housing.
Right.
But where, we've been through this in the past, where the Lincoln School was not acquired with CPA funds, we just can't go in that direction. And
We understand.
we tried to be creative to get you to the historic category.
Which we appreciate.
So,
We're kind of contorting ourselves already a bit.
and so is some part of that project management fee, is it for the construction, or is that for mostly the relocation?
I could get that broken out for you, no problem. I would say let me go through it with you. The project management fee is really for oversight of the total project, which includes the construction of the elevator and the management of relocation of tenants. So it's really for both.
Well, it seems to me that we could probably fund at least some percentage of the historic part that relates to the construction supervision, but not the relocation.
So I could have that broken out.
If you could break that out, that
Yep.
would be good. And the on-site staffing costs, is that, again, mostly relocation?
Virtually entirely relocation, that's
Okay.
right.
Is this project
And-
unique in having temporary displacement? In a lot of major projects, redevelopment, relocation is an expected cost.
I'm sure that it's not unique, but it's,
It's not something we can cover.
we're
Right.
just constrained by the language of the act. The $8,000 in legal for, well, the RFP, aren't you already past the RFP stage?
Oh, I'm sorry, no, we have to, this is all going to be bid, so under the municipal procurement, we will have to work with town council and with Roger to develop a bid.
Well, what is the elevator contract that's referred to up above that? Do you have an existing contract or not?
You mean the contract up above, the
190.
92,000, that's the actual contract to build the elevator with whomever the successful bidder is.
Oh, but you don't
That's
have.
an estimated cost.
So what you have with respect to the construction costs, listed as a remaining elevator contract is a estimate for the actual construction cost to the elevator, not having a contractor in hand or a contractor available to do the work yet.
I saw
As
the
you-
contract, I thought there was.
Yeah,
a
it kind of implies that. But I'd love to talk to Dick offline about, it seems like there might be a couple of items that we might be double dipping a little bit with respect to the consulting services or even legal services, and maybe I can help you with that, because I think that some of these, to be candid, are high, and certainly Cochran Management, great management company, but I don't know that I'd want them managing my construction project. So we can talk about that offline and see, make sure that we're getting the best value that we can for some of those. Seems kind of.
Is that covered in Corcoran's contract?
I would say, I would defer to Dick, but I would say no. I don't. Not for this type of project.
So some of the legal may be covered to the extent that it relates to the construction contract or the RFP. I wouldn't think tenant disputes. I don't know what the HUD involvement would be, whether that's related to the construction or.
Yeah, there are a couple of tenant relocation legal considerations that we just need to address.
Okay, so it sounds like that wouldn't be covered.
Wouldn't be covered,
And
right.
so we'd need a breakout on the legal as well. And then the hub subsidy loss and the soft cost contingency, and the rent loss, I don't see how we could cover that.
Wouldn't the soft cost contingency be at least a fraction of that? Because if we're covering the elevator consultant,
Well,
the permits,
yeah.
the project management.
We might cover some
Some of it.
percentage of it, but,
It'd be pretty
then there's-
small, I think.
Then there's
That's
also,
okay.
Yeah.
Small is good.
Sure.
and I,
Could you just explain this HUD subsidy loss, which is that's a lot, $26,000, so that's because you're not going to collect rent.
Right.
And so,
You can't collect a subsidy from HUD if the rents are, if the units are empty.
I mean, so is that a cost, or is that? It's
Well, it's
money.
revenue they're not receiving. It's a loss.
Yeah, so I
Well,
guess
it's not
maybe, I guess
something
I
we
don't
can
see it as a
cover.
cost, I see it as a loss, but
It's
it's
a
under a
loss.
cost, yeah.
It's a loss to
would not
the
be-
Lincoln School
would not be
Apartments.
covered in any event.
Yeah.
And it would seem that the relocation costs would not be covered either.
Yep.
So we'd be down to, and you determined that an allocation method for the historic part of the building has 22 units that are being served by the elevator, and the new wing has 30, and so you computed that out to be 42% for the historic part.
If my understanding is correct.
So I think we'd be looking at 42% of some number that's less than $200,000.
What if it was done on square footage? Because I'm thinking in
Have-
the
Even
old
smaller, it's gotta
building,
be.
well, do you
could still
think?
have-
In the old building, is there community rooms and stuff like that, which would be used by everybody?
offices.
Did you look at it both ways?
So if you do
No.
it by square, maybe you look at it by square footage?
Isn't the new building much bigger square footage-wise than the old building? I mean, just my eyeball look.
Yeah. Yeah, it is.
It is, then it won't work.
It's unlikely, but we should look at
Take
it.
a look
3
at it.
days, 4 days?
Can't hurt.
Even if we pick up a couple percentage points, that'd be good.
And we would probably need this information by
Friday?
tomorrow if possible. Carol doesn't usually work on Fridays. You're going to work this Friday?
I mean, 42% of 200,000 is 84,000.
Right,
And it's some portion less than that.
right.
But the fact is, they need the 279. That's the problem.
I'm not disputing that. I'm just thinking what we can
So you
cover
have-
with the CPC funds.
You have other reserves, as I understand it.
Yes, we
Got a
do.
friend in the White House.
Yep. Exactly.
She's learning all about HUD, too. I was just telling Dick my latest adventures going through HUD looking for money.
So if, when we get to the final number, that it's possible for us to recommend, and were we to recommend that number, are you confident, and what would the basis for that confidence be that you'd come up with the balance needed?
The next place we'll hear from is the trust. The Affordable Housing Trust is the next up. We'll see how much is there. And then we have two other sources. We have our own reserves, and we have an additional borrowing capability authorized by town meeting, which we would prefer not to utilize.
Does the Affordable Housing Trust have funds that aren't CPC funds?
Yes.
They are part of their delay is asking that question.
From
They have if they're
whence-
CPC
whence did
funds, they are
those
presumed.
funds come?
How many checkbooks are out there?
Because they can't use their funds from this source for the balance.
We can't fund another project with CPC funds.
Yeah,
We can't double fund a project
The
with CPC
the
funds.
Affordable Housing Trust can't take funds that they got from the CPC and use it to fund
The balance.
You can't fund.
a non-CPA authorized.
They do have other funds. The one that comes to mind, and it's a small one, is the Canterbury Village, when all the houses over there are built, for every house that's built. And I'm going to be wrong on the number, but I recollect.
1,500.
Thank you. For each of those houses, there's an amount of money that is put into the trust as opposed to building an affordable unit in that area. And that was like a one-time deal, unless you've been around since the ARC, like me now, nobody remembers it. So there are funds, and there are funds that came from other places too. That 80 Beale Street, they realized funds from the sale of that, so that's not CPC.
See that sheet that we saw?
Well, isn't that the
all
legal question I just asked? That,
Well, there's
when they
other-
get money
there is
back
other
from,
money.
from 80 Beale Street,
Doesn't come back here?
well, it doesn't come back to us, but it should it be subject to
Restricted.
CPA uses?
And we don't really want to borrow because the reserves are not healthy as they are. And we have a generator that is going to be needing to be replaced. Because the generator is the same vintage as everything, and is it 70s or 80s? I can't remember. Do you remember it was, when the generator went in?
I think it's original.
Oh, it is the original.
Yeah.
But
And
if,
that's been problematic lately.
if all else fails, borrowing is an option that could be pursued?
It may be the only option, but we really don't want to do that because we want to go ahead and pay down the debt and get through the mortgage that was taken out as quickly as possible so they can build up their reserves.
Okay. Tony, did you have any comments as project manager?
No, it's the 300,000 has dwindled down, obviously, but I mean, it's something that has to happen. The town has to do it in some fashion. I would like us to do as much as we can with the limitations, but because it has to happen. It's just not an acceptable situation. So any creative accounting, I think we should look at all options that we can.
Well, can you define legal?
No, I'm only kidding, really.
Any other questions or comments from the committee?
I'm just wondering, is there any discretion in the HUD subsidy loss? Because they're saying that the units are going to be vacant for a week, therefore that much of the subsidy is lost. If people take a vacation for a week, they don't cut the subsidy for a week.
It's just not historic preservation.
I mean, we're doing this under historic preservation, not community housing.
No, but I'm saying the HUD's decision to cut back on the subsidy for the short
We
time
don't know
apartments
anything
empty.
about
It seems very...
Well, you can send them a shame on you letter, but
I think it does get cut if they take vacation.
you'd think that HUD would support something like this.
The process it would take to get HUD to step up to this.
Did they admit this policy? Or is it a common policy?
That's their policy.
Yeah.
That's their, those are their rules.
Okay.
Go in the backyard, you lose an hour's worth of subsidy.
Yeah. If you have a vacant unit, if somebody leaves, we have a.
These aren't vacant.
No, well, but for HUD's purpose, they're vacant.
In this
Yeah.
case, the people are outside of them temporarily. They aren't vacant.
Right.
Uncommitted.
I think we're probably beyond the scope of
Okay.
this evening's discussion. Any further comments or questions, or any last thoughts you want to leave us with?
Just to ask for one possible way to look at this, which other grant sources use. Every grant source I've ever worked with, which was restricted to a purpose, did not look at the total budget per se. They looked at the items they were not going to have their funds going into.
I understand your position.
Good.
Thank you for
Thank
all,
you.
for all the great work
you
you're
so
doing
much.
to make this a safe building for its inhabitants.
Thank you for all your consideration.
Okay. And 875 Main Street.
So I've been, Matt Zyper, the project manager for 875 Main Street. I've been asked to read the statement from the Baileys, who are the applicant for this project, who are unable to attend tonight's meeting. I'll start here. I'm offering to sell, this is written from Carol and Jim Bailey, who are the owners of this parcel. I'm offering to sell this 875 Main Street 3.5-acre parcel to the town of Hingham for $95,000. Because of the recent interest by the town to buy the Aquarian Water Company, my property at 875 Main Street, and its proximity to the water company lends itself to the beauty and the natural habitat of both parcels of land, If the town is successful in acquiring the water company property, 875 Main Street and the water company parcel would join the George Washington Forest in a contiguous flow of properties and would enhance the natural beauty of all the parcels. Our property also has the remnants of a colonial road that at one time started on Cushing Street and meandered along the Elk River, crossed Main Street, and continued through the acquiring property and ended on the other side of the George Washington Forest on Charles Street. Public access to my property is over a right-of-way at the end of Constitution Road, which was part of the old colonial road. It is my understanding that the headwaters of the Elk River, the last cold water stream in town, runs into the Boy Scout property acquired last year by the town, and the purchase of the 875 Main Street parcel would certainly be a good addition for the watershed. Although this is our second time submitting our proposal to the CPC, my husband and I feel the 875 Main Street project would be a positive asset for the town of Hingham. Thank you, Carol and Jim Bailey.
Any further comments?
I mean, we have explored this parcel. We have had extensive discussions. I have primarily with Gary, representing the planning board, and as well in both primarily electronic communication with the Baileys. There does not seem to be, based on the parameters of this parcel, that there is a credible development opportunity for this parcel that would even support this $95,000 current price. This is not a parcel that has been recommended for consideration by the CPC, by the Open Space Committee. It is something that could conceivably be considered purely as an open space acquisition, similar to what the Boy Scout property one that would not be developed, which would lead to a price much lower than $95,000. Hard to say, but probably in the teens or 20s in terms of acquisition cost. There's also the unlikelihood of this being developed at all, based on the development considerations, development limitations. So we extended the offer to the Baileys to withdraw. They asked this letter to be read instead. So I don't countenance how this is going to gain a affirmative recommendation from this committee.
And Open Space does not support it.
Yeah, they haven't supported it, and they were asked. This has not been presented as a purely open space acquisition, which would have a very different price, and then maybe something the committee might consider, although given the limited development potential, there may be the feeling that the wetlands complex, which is the largely valuable portion of this property for conservation, isn't really at risk at all. So I think we're kind of done with this project.
Any further comments or questions?
Even though it's a beautiful property on Main Street.
I agree with
So,
I would agree with that.
Yeah, okay. I suspect we probably are all in agreement on that one. But
I didn't ask to have this spot on the agenda. So
a few thoughts and considerations.
I would add that the Baileys are wonderful and have been terrific to work with.
And they really have been good to offer this to the town.
And they have the interest of the towns in mind. So
and I'm sure that Open Space will keep it in the back of their minds, and if Aquarian is acquired and it makes a difference, that may change the picture, but it's probably just not right for this cycle. We're having our voting on recommendations meeting next Wednesday. I hope everybody can attend. In anticipation of that, I've been in touch with Ted Alexiadis and Jean Montgomery concerning the Heritage Museum and any set-aside we may need for repayment of bonds through June 30th of 2016, because that is what we would need to anticipate for the funding cycle on that. I have asked them to get me an answer this week. Based on what we were told last year, we were looking at something like $110,000 in addition to the 146 that we've already set aside. Now, because the bonds are being issued, or would be issued presumably at least 6 months later than we originally thought, the 110 may conceivably go down. But that, in terms of putting your thinking caps on with respect to making recommendations from what we have, you may have to take 110 out of the available funds. Carol, can you circulate tomorrow the funds on hand, including the rainy day fund? But I personally would feel we should continue to look at that as a rainy day fund and not delve into it absent a rainstorm. And then if everybody would get to me by, say, 5 o'clock on Monday, their thoughts on what they would like to see their personal recommendations would be in terms of projects, prioritization of the importance of the projects, perhaps within categories, and the amounts that they think should be recommended for each project. As we have in the past, I will try to see where there is a consensus, and I suspect there's probably going to be a consensus on a fair number of projects, and that, as usual, will come down to a few where we'll have to make some hard decisions.
I agree with all that. In looking at the numbers, I'm just mindful, the spend or set aside for housing is the 114. The 78 or something of that nature is...
No, for housing it's 191.
Well, some of that is already in the reserve from the prior year. I mean, I was just looking at that thinking...
That's what, the housing reserve I have is 191,761.
Correct. That's last year's reserve and this year's. So that's what we have to spend.
No, but this year, we need to, 10% of this year's money needs to be spent or set aside for housing. So that's an additional 114.
No.
No.
No, if you look to the left of that, it's
77.
77.
That's a carryover.
Correct, plus 114.
Plus 114.
I get it, but the new, each year, you have to spend or set aside 10%.
That is the new.
That is
the new 10%.
That number, it
The
includes both
114.
years.
We had no carryover for historic or
No, I
open
know, but
space.
isn't it the 10% of the current year,
Yes.
current year's revenue or current? I thought it's the 10% of the current year's revenue. I don't think it's 10%. Well, the current, I don't think money in the reserve counts as current year revenue. It's already been set aside. I'm just thinking, as we look at the money that we need to spend for housing.
The 114, 143
Yeah.
is 10% of the 1,141,430 revenue.
Correct.
And then we had 77,618 carryover from last year, which gives us 191,761 for housing.
Okay.
So if we were to do a full 175
Okay, so then, okay, I'm confusing myself.
plus the amount requested for 132 Scotland Street would actually be slightly exceeding, for the first time in a while, the housing reserve.
Okay, so we can't spend under 114 though on housing.
We can, yeah. We
Set it aside.
We can set it
Spend
aside.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
Because isn't like on the open space, what I saw, they said they were suggesting leave the open space reserve alone and just carry it over, because they didn't have, we really don't have any open space
So that's
property.
the 63,000 we would have to set aside.
No,
Or
it's 114.
Well, we're gonna, if we make the $50,000 recommendation, the balance is $64,000.
Bob, just so I understand on the
Spend or set aside.
when you were explaining this earlier, ATM 2013 approval, is that set aside in 2014? Trying to understand how much is set aside then.
We did not spend $146,000 last year
Did not.
from our available money. We basically set it aside
Okay.
so that, and because we anticipated that there was going to be a bond issue in September of 2014, and that the 146 was the there were some extra charges that were anticipated because of issuing costs, and that's what we were told by the town treasurer and Ted to set aside. So
would that be set aside from last year's funds?
It's already there.
that's already there.
From last
That's,
year's
yes,
funds?
right. That's
So
already
then
there.
This year's funds is the 100 and.
Well, it may
Yeah.
be something less than
I see.
110.
Okay, just wanted to-
I just want them to give us a conservative number
Yeah.
so that we don't run out of money to repay the bonds by June 30th of 2016, because then next year we'll need to set aside a different amount.
But
So-
that 146 would cover the first year of debt service, whenever that starts.
When that starts.
And the issuance costs.
Well, as anticipated last year. Now, bonding costs may have gone up a little.
Or down.
Or down, right?
Well,
I doubt down.
I think the
You mean the-
interest rate is gone up probably a tiny bit, but we still have a great bond rating, and so that's, I'm not anticipating a dramatic change in that number. And as soon as we get it, I'll have Carol let everybody know what it is.
So Carol, be nice enough to give us that worksheet like we had in the
Yes,
past.
I'll do that, because that's
I
great.
like that.
That's right.
Yeah, wonderful. Any other thoughts about at least this preliminary process to get us to a stage where we get voting?
I think it worked better than last year.
Although I am disappointed that people are coming in last minute.
Yeah.
I mean, we're getting numbers thrown at us tonight that we haven't seen, and, you know, people are saying, oh, the holidays. Well, this process started in September, so Christmas doesn't count.
August.
Yeah, but I mean,
Christmas
like,
does come every year.
yeah, and so, I mean,
Not a
that kind of
surprise.
is a little bit weak, you know.
Yeah, sure.
So, I mean, I hopefully that, you know, in my mind, that we kind of look at this like who's ready to go, who's got their act together, but not this last-minute stuff, especially like we had last year, where we're debating things and trying to make things work the last 5 minutes of the vote.
But look at the good side.
Yeah.
It's a lot better than it was last year.
Yeah, no, I agree.
And we moved to further out in further years sooner, projects that would have come to the very end of the process, and we would have said no, and we knew no very early in the game.
Yeah, so I mean, I think that, I mean, it is good. Again, it's like, again, it would be nice to see people respected the process.
I can tell you it's rough on Carol and I, so at the risk of venting a little bit, because, you know,
She gets it all.
you know, we had some proponents come forward to us the day of the meeting, and then you ask us, have you vetted the estimates? And we're trying to be respectful and mindful of everybody's goals, but it's tough sometimes to sort of give you the answers that you really deserve when we see the stuff at the 11th
Remember
hour.
what Lisa Shetty, I think it was Lisa Shetty, said that she had learned a whole lot. I think it was Lisa.
Yeah.
And she kind of felt sorry for people just beginning, that now if she came back, she would know what to do.
Yeah.
So, but I think this is a great process, and Carol's book is fabulous. You can't go wrong if you follow it.
Just wish more people read it.
Yeah.
Well, now, come on.
So,
What do you think?
It's like manuals for
What do you
your
think?
phone and things.
what our
Forget it,
processes
just
and
give you a little
procedures, I think they're
one
tremendous.
ticket sheet and let you figure it out.
I actually think, you know, we're going to carry over some of them into the Historical Commission with respect to the Greenbush Trust Fund, because we award money in similar ways. So,
I did have one question, with respect to when Carol begins to put together the spreadsheet, we have some still questions about the actual potential appropriations or a set of some money for these particular projects that are still not, in my mind, black and white. So are we going to take a stab at that? Do you want us to take a stab at sort of giving you those numbers as you begin to sort of, how are we going to work that?
Do you mean like the elevator?
Well, you have the elevator,
500 and have
you've got
you
the
play
rec
with them?
bond, we've got almost all the projects, I think, that we've talked, well, a lot of the projects where we have a number, but it's not exactly cut in stone.
On the Lincoln School elevator, we were just head scratching over here on when we were looking at the allocations that we thought were supportable by CPC funding versus the overall list. And we were looking at, the original's 279, but when we added it all up on the ones that we thought we heard they were covered by CPC, it was 169. So call it 170. And then if we said that you were suggesting 42% could be funded by CPC funds of that number, that's about $70,000.
Do you want me to bring it down to 70?
Well, I'm just, that was just, when I was listening, that's one project, might get it closer.
But I also think we have a fiduciary responsibility to not guess at a number. I mean, I understand they need the money, but quite honestly, we're spending taxpayer dollars, so to say 70 looks like the right number, I don't feel comfortable about that. I think we need to know the number that we should be funding, whether it's 70 or 90, whatever it is, we should know. And I mean, echo Kathleen, coming in this late makes it very difficult for this committee to honestly say, we want to fund this, but I'm not just going to say, here it is. It's up to...
Is that, and for example, on the elevator project, the responsibility then for that definition of that number is the applicant. They would come to us with a number that they feel is supportable by CP funds, and they would recommend that to us.
Right.
Okay, that's going to happen soon.
And make it be documented.
I would suggest that you give us the lowest number you think is supportable.
I mean, I don't know how that's fair to Carol to make that determination for the elevator.
Well,
I mean,
Roger's going
Roger.
no, but some of that's legal things. I mean, we sort of went through it and said, this seems legal, this doesn't. I mean, I don't know. I feel like I'm channeling Kathleen here, but it's some of this is just, disappointing that you have I mean, I think the design for the ramp is great, but you haven't seen these numbers. We don't know if they're high or not. I mean, they're still only asking for 20, but it's just, I don't know.
And the meeting's when? I know we have to see
Monday?
Wednesday.
Next Wednesday, we're going to vote.
But we want to review it on Monday. Get the numbers on
We're
Monday.
going to be deciding on Monday.
Well, at least we're not make, I mean.
No, but at least, I mean, I'll deliberate over the weekend, as I'm sure most of us will be thinking and going through these. I mean, you don't want to just sit down and take a vote. You want to be, in my opinion, again, you're spending taxpayer money, and I think most of us take this very seriously, or all of us take it very seriously. So I'd like to know that the numbers that we're considering are, again, I mean, not dollar to dollar, but darn close as to what,
Yeah, I mean,
what
just
the
this thing like,
expense is.
we're trying to work it out for them and figure it out for them. They're asking for money, just like we're a grant organization, and so therefore they should have their numbers together, and that we're not kind of pushing it along at the very last minute and making things up. I mean, it's a dollar and cents issue. I mean, all these are good projects. There's no doubt about that.
I guess one thing that has escaped me for some of these projects is, if we don't fund it, what happens? Like, there's a bunch of those that, is the roof going to fall in? Is this, because you look at this list, we're not funding all these. There's a whole bunch we're not going to fund. And some of these, I don't have a good sense if we don't fund it. I get a sense of the elevator. We don't fund it. There are lives of people, I mean, although there's a huge balance of money that has to be found separate from this committee. But that's, for some people, a life or death thing. But other things, what if we don't? If we don't do the roof.
One of the things we looked at on Building 52 was, what do we want versus what do we need? And so it's a deferred maintenance issue, and if we defer the roof any longer, it's a capital project. The rest of the scope can be deferred, and it's still deferred maintenance. The building isn't going to deteriorate if I don't replace the windows to what they originally were, but if we don't do the roof based on the experience in the storms, I don't know how much longer that wants
Was
to
it
go.
2015 or 16? Like, if we say we can't do that roof this year, what happens?
It's just more deterioration, and it's more expensive to do it next year.
It's like the tennis courts.
More patches, more
And there's a bunch of these that we're not funding. I mean, we don't have that money. I mean, that's the
But
reality.
also, too, I mean, you sort of get the sense like, oh, if you don't do it, it won't happen. Then you say, well, we can only give you this much. Oh, yeah, well, we have other sources. So all of a sudden, there's like extra pockets and checkbooks that are sort of getting heard about. So there's sad stories.
Cases.
Yeah, so I mean, it's not, it's, I don't know if we're always getting the complete story about how bad things are. I mean, with the elevator, they can borrow the money. It's not, they can get other places. It's not where they want to, but they can. And I don't want to borrow, I mean, no one wants to borrow money in their personal life. You'd rather have the money to pay for it. So, it's kind of having to maybe take a little bit of a tough look at some of the situations.
So right now, is the delta about $420,000 between what we have versus what's requested? $1.5 million versus $1,098,000. Is that what the delta is?
Correct, yeah. That's what we have.
So it's about 400.
Yeah, but the Lincoln School elevator is going to go down by 200,000.
Yeah, so that's not really there.
So, then your delta's down to about 200,000.
But that doesn't include a rainy day allocation.
Did you already drop the fire museum?
That's not
Did you already include the fire
I
museum?
included the
What do you
reduction.
mean?
Our rainy day fund?
That's-
And what's in a
that's not
rainy day
counted.
fund, like 30,000?
No,
Yeah.
it's over 50.
Yeah. Oh, is it 50?
Yeah, it's over 50.
I set it up as an account.
So then you're looking at, what, about $200,000 delta?
Well, it's around 300, I think.
$300,000.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean you have to approve everything.
Yeah, just because you have the money to meet
No,
everything.
no, I'm just
doesn't
trying to get a
have
sense of scale.
Yeah.
Rainy
Where
day
we are.
fund,
Yeah.
we have
What the delta is.
Yeah.
46,000.
Save some money.
We'll do the best we can.
46,000 is in the rainy day.
Simple question, I think, maybe. Carol?
Carol?
I'm sorry.
The number up top, the $1,098,000, I heard you were saying $1,141,000. Why is there a difference?
Which one, I'm sorry?
Very
The
top,
total
total
budget,
CPA
the-
budget says $1,098,000.
Correct.
But the 10% is of $1,141,000.
Yeah, so what happened when last year, you actually pulled forward to pay for some of the projects. In addition to that, the $1,098,000 doesn't express the additional local tax increases that you will see, so it's actually a little more than that, but we don't include that because it's not, we assume the taxes are going to go up, and it's, so we have an incremental increase from year to year. Every year, the town's taxes, go up, and those collections go up, but we haven't shown that. We have that in the spreadsheet. We can talk about that, but that value there's a value there.
You'll give us the full
Yeah.
spreadsheet from which this is derived. Yeah.
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 Some of you have it already.
Yeah, well, we've got older versions.
Oh, okay.
We don't have the current up-to-the-minute one.
Did we spend some of this year's money last year? I mean,
Some, yes.
Bonded.
How much, do you know?
We'd have to go back and check and see what that is.
I don't remember reaching forward for anything.
We did not spend it all. We did not spend it all last year.
Why don't we get something together and we'll give you a printout of
We
what
didn't
it's.
spend it all. No, I would have taken it. No, I thought.
Yeah,
we didn't do that last year.
No, we didn't do that last year. But in thinking about the Delta 2, Gary, I mean, it looks like under the open space reserve, assuming that conservation gets $50,000, that there's going to be an untouchable 64 there.
Does rec come out, do the rec projects
There's
come out?
no
open
rec
space?
reserve.
Oh, so that comes out of general fund?
That comes out of general
Oh, okay.
fund.
Right, so another 65.
Does rec come out of open space?
Nope, there is no recreation reserve.
Should we add a line, for example, at Open
It's with
Space
the
Act?
Act, we looked at
Well,
that
no, there
last
isn't a
year.
reserve, but isn't Open Space and Rec the same category?
No?
No, it's just,
Yes and no.
In the spreadsheet, would it make sense to add a line at each line item? Let's say, for example, under open space acquisitions, should we add a line which is the net reserve amount in addition to the, for example, the requested amount? So in other words, it's 50,000 for the conservation fund. Should we add a line that says, okay, the net to get to the open space reserve is X, so that it's tallied in the sheet?
I could put the reserve at the beginning of each category, if that would help you.
That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, I could do that.
And then you
on your
could do a
spreadsheet.
net on that as to how much of the reserve has to remain versus
Okay.
it's allocated below.
Like what you're given, what you can spend, and we're not going to be spending that, so you need to put this money aside.
And then it gets it into the line item review.
Correct.
And then also under the Heritage Museum, should we enter the 110 in the revised amount category so it's accounted for?
Or whatever the...
Might not be 110.
Might not be
Whatever the
110,
amount
but-
is.
but should we add that in just because we have to account for it?
Right, yep.
Well, we put 146 aside last year. This
So-
year.
Is that the
It's spent
district?
money, right?
So the delta's back up over 400,000.
So we're back up over 400,000.
Yeah.
That's what I thought. Just so that when we're reconciling this, we know what the actual amount is of the delta that we have to work against.
They want to go back into the reserve.
No, it would go
It
into
just
this-
we
it would go
carry
into
that
this
as an
column.
expense.
Right.
Yes.
Appropriate that, or recommend for
Yeah.
appropriation.
Yeah, just so we have it in front of us. 'Cause that- the delta's 400 with it, the actual delta's
But it's
400.
probably coming out of the reserve. It's using up the historical reserve.
Yeah, it's going to get parked in some fund though after it's going to get parked in the Heritage Museum fund.
Right.
Then be 250-something thousand in there.
Right.
Yes.
Any other questions, new business, thoughts about the decision-making process? Okay, is there?
I would like to make a motion that we adjourn.
I bet there's a second.
Second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Same time as last year.
Opposed?
Right